Yes, I better pull YouTube up here. Huh?
Mhm.
Hey everyone, welcome. Happy Thursday. We are back, Ashley Dull and Natasha Velez, for
Hi
our
guys.
GovConHacks Live. How is everyone this Thursday?
I'm rather well.
Are you? I'm rather well too. It's almost Friday, and that makes it even better.
Every Thursday is almost Friday, and that's why I'm always happy in this meeting.
It couldn't be because of the wine, could it?
Oh, that too. It helps.
Ah, so
It's
we are talking today, guys, about indirect rates. And while I know this is not everybody's favorite glamorous subject, for those of you who are in services, definitely something you're going to need to know about. So
Mhm.
I figured I'm making my way to YouTube now. Sorry for the delay. So if you are joining us on Facebook, because I think we are actually streaming at least to my Facebook profile right now, in addition to YouTube, we can only watch one platform at a time. So come on in over to YouTube, ask your comments in the chat. I am watching live now that I'm there. And we wanted to we did a little bit of research. We wanted to kind of pull up a couple of visuals to help you understand this topic. But before we dig into that, what even is, Natasha, an indirect rate? And why do they even need to know about this?
So your indirect rate is essentially what we would call in the commercial world your multiplier. It's the thing that everybody kind of says, what's my profit margin? Like, how much do I make, right? Because I know we always focus on that top line number, 1 million, 5 million, 10 million, but that's not really how much you make after you've paid your employees, your subcontractors, and purchased all your materials. You have what we call a gross profit margin. Well, that's also just a gross profit margin because you still have expenses that you use to run your business. So that is your accounting costs, your HR costs. These are all indirect rates. These are rates that you can't bill to the government, but they still are expenses that are required for you to keep, being a business. So
For
the government
operations,
understands
yeah.
that. Yeah, and
The
they
cost
understand
of doing business,
that.
yeah.
Exactly. So they get that, and you are allowed to bill a portion of those expenses to the government, essentially the indirect rate. So versus just guessing 20 to 30, 40%, there is a way to calculate what your actual indirect rate if you do have a business that you currently have been working on. If you have a forecast, you can use that too, because then that's your forecasted rate and then you can kind of adjust it accordingly. Or you can use a rate that you currently have, and I'll show you how to do that. But this is just kind of a way to help you come up with that multiplier of what your profit margins are, what is your fringe, and what breaks that indirect rate is essentially your overhead, your general and administration, and your fringe. And I think we've talked about this before in our pricing. On our pricing show, so you guys can go back to that and re-watch that for clarification. But just very quickly for this show, overhead is your rent, your IT services, the back end costs to run your business. G&A is your general administration, so your office supplies, your accounting team, your HR team, your virtual assistant, whatever. Um, and then your fringe is all the benefits of keeping your labor workforce. So payroll taxes, recruitment costs, healthcare. So those are what those things incorporate. And you have to remember that you have to pay those. You can't bill them explicitly to the government, but you can bill a percentage. So you want to be able to put those rates on top of your cost. For instance, if a supplier tells you, your subcontractor tells you, hey, this is $5,000. And you say to yourself, what do I want to bill the government then? Well, your indirect rate is what you would want to put on top of your supplier's cost. And then you want to add your profit. So that way you're not utilizing your profit, to eat into your business costs. So that's how we kind of break it out.
Explanation that simplifies it. Thank you. And that kind of lays the groundwork for the template that you're about to see.
Yeah.
And I think we even have a sample P&L statement so that you can see what it looks like actually broken out. Um, Before you can get to any of this, though, I do think it's important to know that whether you're a government contractor, whether even just as a business owner or a freelancer, even way before I had my business, when I was just an independent consultant, I still had to keep books. Like, we have to know what's coming in, what's going out to make
Mhm.
sure that we're profitable and can grow the business. So this is no different, than your accountant down the street or the girl that, packs up the little baggies on TikTok or whatever. They all have a way to track their books. So if this feels a little bit over your head and you don't have a way to track your books, definitely recommend starting there. And you don't need to hire, an accountant for hundreds of dollars an hour, just a bookkeeper to train you how to keep your books if you're just starting out. All right, I'll let you go ahead now. I'm sorry, I'll get off my
I would
soapbox.
no, I would totally agree. I think that sometimes we want to stay away from things like finance. And as a business owner, I think that it's all our responsibility to be very on top of our finances. It is really important for you to know where your dollars are going. That when you're making money, it's all not going on your, cars and your clothes. It's you have to pay taxes on it. You have expenses. You are now a business. This is a different level, this different mindset, right? So what we usually do in government contracting is project accounting. Project accounting is so that you can understand where your money's going when you're doing a contract, which is essentially a project. So this is an example of a profit and loss statement. This is something that you would print out in the report section of your QuickBooks. So when you start obtaining costs, you're going to have an accountant or a bookkeeper or yourself inputting those costs into your system. And in that accounting system, it's going to generate a report for you, which is quite nice because you can kind of see what your services and income is versus your direct costs. Now, direct costs are all the costs that you utilize against a project. Those are not, indirect costs, they're direct costs. Direct costs are billable to the government. So direct labor, direct materials, your subcontractors, other direct costs, such as like shipping, all those costs can be directly 100% billed on a contract to the government. So that's why you want to keep that there because especially when you're billing the government, you want to make sure that you've built them correctly, the full amount. And along with that, even if it's a firm fixed price, you still want to keep track of that to see what your profit margins are. Like, did I bill them right? Did I make enough money on this project? So on and so forth. So it helps you create analysis so that you can be better in the future when bidding. So total cost of goods sold, as you can see, the gross profit margin here is 137,000, right? But it doesn't end there. I've paid all my employees, I've bought materials, I've paid for travel, I've done all the stuffs. I still have expenses. So those expenses can be anywhere in your expenses, you can have your utilities. All of this is overhead costs, facilities expenses, contract labor, rent, utilities, phone, all that good stuff, right? Then it goes into fringe, employee benefits, health insurance. Then you have general administration, which is your advertising costs, events, conference events, your marketing costs, any bids and proposal time that you spent, and of course the cost to create and generate them. Travel, as it comes with conferences. So all those things, along with your office expenses and software, are part of expenses that you can't bill directly to them, but you can bill a percentage. So this is going to help me generate my indirect rates because now I have somewhat of a platform and an idea of what my costs are. So for that, I would take these numbers and I would plug them in So normally, because I do a lot of finance, I use like a 27 tab indirect rate sheet that calculates it to the T that the government likes. We're not gonna do that to you. You don't need that. If you
Right.
Google indirect cost calculator, you will find a million people out there with a different version of it that will help you. Why rewrite the wheel, right? Just download it. It's free. I stole one here from leftbrainpro.com. He
They
has a
are
really awesome
awesome.
one.
Yeah, shout out to Robert for sure. He's very good at this.
Yes, he has. I mean, this thing is locked in, so you can't change anything or mess anything up. For people like me that I'm like, where did I mess up my formula?
Start
No,
poking and playing. How
yep,
did I
nope,
do
doesn't work.
that? Back,
Nope.
back, back.
You can literally just take what's here. So, for instance, direct costs, fringe costs, your overhead costs. It asks you right here, what is your total direct labor costs? Well, I know that my direct labor cost was 5,811.50 on this particular P&L. So then I could then put that in here. So everywhere where it's highlighted, you can put that in there. And we'll give you the website that you can download this on. Um, I'm sure he'll love the full access of everybody coming in. But the materials, you can add your materials here, you can add your direct travel here and your other direct costs, and any subcontracting costs can be there too. Like, and this will calculate your total direct cost. So these are all the costs that you pay towards performing work, all your cost of goods sold. Then here it has the option to put in your overhead labor, again, your G&A labor, so proposal labor, admin labor, overhead labor, IT labor, anything of that magnitude can go in there. This is bids and proposals labor, so any labor that you bill to proposals, research and development, all of that's in there. All you have to do is plug in the numbers here from this P&L statement in your QuickBooks.
I went ahead and popped that website into the chat. So if you're watching and you want the template, go check out Left Brain Professionals at leftbrainpro.com and grab it from
Mhm.
there.
And so when you do that, it will automatically tell you what your rate is. Now I'm messing with the numbers here dramatically. So I'm gonna put it back to what they were. My rate was crazy. Um, it'll tell you what your rate is. So essentially your fringe rate is at 44.12 based on the numbers that I have provided in here. Your overhead rate is at 0.72. That's because I barely put any overhead in here.
So that 44, go back up for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
This is definitely something that whether you're new at this or whether you've been at it a while, you're going to want to know. What what fringe rate do we want, right? Like if I'm deciding whether I'm going to go or no go on a big contract, right? And I plug in my numbers, what should that rate be at for me to have a warm, fuzzy feeling to go ahead and proceed? Like, what's ideal? Because that looks really super high.
It is high. So ideally you want 30 to 35%. And that rate, in fairness, I mean, we all know that medical costs are really high and they skyrocket up 20% every year. But essentially, you want it to be 30 to 35%. So that requires some negotiation, finding a better broker, finding a better plan. And so you have control with your indirect rates. The moment you don't have control is because you're not monitoring it. You want to monitor it because it's a way, it's almost like I would say a KPI, right? It is your way of monitoring where your costs are really high. And this matters because of moments like LPTA, your lowest price to win. It's best value, not so much, but lowest price to win. You want to be low, you want to win, but at the same time, you don't want to win at the expense that you can't afford to manage it. I can't afford project managers, or I can't afford the fringe benefits, or I can't afford if it's an SEA, good luck. Like, so
Right.
there's so much that comes in the back end. If you, let's say, got a huge contract that requires you to have an HR staff to hire for staff augmentation, you have to think about all the back end costs that you have to be able to support. Now, if you're not making enough money, your labor's going your fringe and your indirect rates are going to be really high. So the way you mitigate those to make it so that it's lower is you have to win more contracts, more sales, or lower costs, one or the other.
And then when you
That's
go to win more contracts, that means more proposals.
mhm,
That means more
more G&A.
hours, more time, and that eats into your margins too.
Yes,
So it would make sense to be smart about what you apply your effort to bid on,
correct.
by monitoring these numbers. And it might not be perfect the first time. You might be sitting here like, well, I haven't made a dollar yet. There's none to track. It's good. That's actually a good thing because you're going to get yourself in good habits from the very beginning. You see a lot of videos out there. This person won 3 million. I won 2 million. They won 50,000 in 30 days. Yeah, they won that, but that wasn't their profit. And
Yeah.
to get an award on a lowest price technically acceptable by just bumping up the price that you're getting from the subcontractor or the supplier may not be the best way, because what happens if you actually win? And what happens if you forgot to take into consideration that there needs to be somebody available 8 hours a day to take that government's call and you didn't account for it? So now it's got to be you and they're blowing up your phone. I'm just using that as a loose example, like not to beat a dead horse, but there's more that's going to go in to your final price that you offer to the government, based on all the things that are on the spreadsheet. It's not just the cost of goods sold. So
And
I believe
to
that's it.
kind of piggyback on that, and this we will put on this the site. Because we kind of dumbed this down to make life a little easier for you. 'Cause I know a lot of you want this pricing sheet, so it's yours to have and to hold. Um, when someone says, I have won this much money, that's awesome, right? Like, let's be real. Let's say I won a $260,000 bid. That's not how much I'm taking home. It's a 5-year contract. So in reality, I'm making about this much. And then I have fringe. That's the health insurance to keep that employee. Then I have labor because I have to pay that employee. And then whatever else, and these are the rest of the gross profit margins, but then I'm left with $11,477.
And that looks good on year one compared to the rest of the years, right?
Yeah, it's pretty bad. So, and that was because they lowered, in this specific one, they lowered the hours of usage. So not always, for instance, here, if you had a full-time employee, let's be realistic, the government doesn't always pay you for full-time hours. They don't want to pay for sick leave. They don't want to pay for PTO. They don't want to pay for holidays. And they have like, what, like 11 now? They don't want to pay for those hours. That's an indirect rate.
Those are on you. You
Yeah.
still have to pay those,
But you
but you
still have
can't
to
bill
pay
them
your
for them.
employee.
Right.
So you're billing the government for total hours of 1856 for the year, which in a given year is 2080 of working hours. But you're only billing the government 1856, and they'll tell you like how many hours you're allowed to bill them. And then, but you're still paying your labor force the 2080. So you have to remember that. And keeping track of those margins, knowing that my gross profit margin is only 19%. I mean, we can say 19%, that sounds nice, but in the scope of things, in a year, you only made 11 grand. So is this worth going after if I'm only making 11,000 a year and I have to do all of this maintenance of this employee. That's your bid no bid analysis. That's where you decide, should I? And then on top of that, am I profitable enough? What's my indirect rates? What's that cost look like? Because I can say that, let's assume I want to check my overhead. Let's assume my business costs in general are the following. Let's say my overhead is at, let's say it's at 15%. I would hope it's higher than that, because then you have some explaining to do. You have your G&A, and let's keep everybody at 15%, right? Let's say that's that. So then out of that $11,477, that's going to overhead. And that's going to G&A. So that's how much I'm using on expenses. So if I'm really being real, this, after my indirect rate costs, that's really how much I'm taking home at the end for me to pay myself.
Doesn't seem like a whole lot when you look at it that way. So if I have this contract and another contract, say at 24%, and they're both due on the same day, which one do you think I'm going to go with? And it's just about working smarter, not harder, right? That's the name of the game here on this channel. We want to give you guys enough information to be able to make these educated decisions rather than just, throwing stuff at the wall, hoping something will stick, because your time is money. You're a business owner, and we can't be profitable and grow a business if we don't know what our costs are. So this was excellent just to kind of see the math live.
Yeah, 'cause, like,
Right.
look, at the end of the day, like, I mean, it's, everyone's like, oh, this is the top. And I'm like, bro, what was your gross? What was your gross? Like, and what are your expenses? Then I'll tell you if it's worth it or not, right? You can give me 5 million, but if I only made $50 off of it, I don't really care.
Right.
So it
Exactly.
doesn't matter to me. It doesn't benefit me in the least. What am I doing? Nothing. Struggling, essentially.
Sure.
So struggling. So for this specifically, you see how I go from 60,000. I know where my fringe is going. It's going on health insurance. I know that I have to pay direct labor. I know that I have rent expenses for the year. I know I have accounting and HR and software and different expenses because, there's little things here and there, travel. And this is being modest because in reality, with today's prices of everything, this is way more than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
They're just dummy numbers for
yeah,
sure.
I'm just being really humble and modest about it. But
We do have a
essentially, you have the 8,000 for the year, but then you think when I even break it down per month, that's really all you're making.
that's not
So
to
no,
manage that whole contract, make sure everybody gets paid. It's definitely not a lot. You're right. We do have a question in the chat from Deshaun.
yeah.
Deshaun asks, is there a certain fringe rate for certain industries, like for example, medical versus construction?
Yes. Medical is stronger than construction. So construction is very top heavy with the direct labor. And then for medical, a lot of it is just straight. It depends. It's like per diem, and then their fringe is really healthy. So every single industry has a different, and I push this all day long. You should have a different indirect rate structure based on the level of effort of each of your niches. Because construction, you have more liability and your insurance rates are super high. They're
Yeah.
so high. Your bid bond is high. Everything is high because you have bigger workman's compensation rates, all of that. So your rates are completely different, and you don't want that rate to eat into something that's something as simple as if you decide to do medical. Well, it doesn't have the same insurance rate, workman's comp rate, right? So we want to mitigate that. But that's a more advanced class.
Good question, Deshaun. That was a really good
That is a
question.
really good one. Medical is more like, you're hiring people that are in the medical field. You want a healthy fringe. you want good medical, you want retirement, you want dental, you want, life insurance, you want all that. So you're going to have to up the ante, especially to retain, because your
Payment.
whole thing is to get staff that want a career. So it's a different level. And that's
And take
strategy.
OpenAI. OpenAI is a great example of that.
Yep.
I believe they plucked a Google engineer, and it somebody over there had come out and said that they had to up the ante essentially to get the talent that they needed to acquire to do the things that
Yes.
they wanted to do. And it's very common for those of you who are in IT. You have to offer an attractive benefits package
Mhm.
because with that industry being so competitive, and if you're priming on like NASA soup, I got to tell you, your competitors, they'll be interviewing your employees, offering higher salaries, better packages just to get the intel. So,
I
it's
agree.
definitely a dog eat dog world, and I wouldn't go into a field like IT with a cheap mindset thinking that you're gonna get off subcontracting all the work. Those guys cost money, right?
Oh, yeah, they
Yeah.
do.
And especially like cybersecurity too. So,
And you have to
cybersecurity.
consider the fact that there's a whole methodology right now where, you know, everyone's trying to get engineers. And so, you're going through that whole concept of like hiring engineers like just when they start, they want like 125,000 just starting. And
Yeah.
then along with that, after a year, they quit. Everyone's doing
Someone
that.
offers them something better.
They quit after a year because they've got the experience now. Now they're going somewhere higher. And now not only are you paying the cost to rehire someone, but you're also paying the cost to retrain that person. So it's not the easiest. Those are the back end costs we're talking about. Those are the risks essentially. So to kind of segue into indirect rates, this is also in the pricing example that we will provide you guys. It gives you kind of the analysis of what a fringe benefit is, G&A and operating expenses for your overhead. These are different numbers that you can play with and change it, and it will change the amount here for your gross profit margins and your net. And so along with that, you can also remember, I know everyone's like, what's my fee? Your fee's after all this. This is not your profit. That's not a profit. That's for you to run your business. That's not a profit. Your profit is after all those expenses. And this is what we call a wrap rate. This is your multiplier. This is what you want to, and industry standards, usually it's anywhere from a 1.3 to a 1.5. So a lot of people are higher than that. And that's fine. But if you're LPTA, you want to keep track of it.
Yeah.
But just for general statements.
Yeah. Keeping costs down is super important when you're bidding in the LPTA world.
Well, if you're too high, again, I always tell people there is only two options. And you're like, oh, I can't win at that number. Okay. But
Then
you're
don't
also
bid.
you're not making any money. Now, there are methodologies to that again. You can stack, which means more sales. The more contracts you win, the lower your wrap rate gets. So win more. Have at it. If you're not winning, maybe have a conversation and say, all right, we got to cut some costs so that we can get this down and be more winnable. Plus, it's also internally, this is great. It's not just good for pricing, it's just good to know. If you're too high on something, you're like, I might be spending too much money on fringe. Where can I negotiate with my vendors and suppliers? Or maybe I'm spending too much money on overhead costs. Where can I cut down? What do I need? What do I not need? And then I can increase it when I win a contract. So, and that's what we like to call in the finance world what if analysis. But I'll
I
definitely.
like that. That brings up a good point because a lot of folks always ask, well, how do we negotiate a better price with our suppliers? And I would say by keeping these good records, right? You're
Mhm.
working with someone, let's just give you a scenario. You're working with someone for a year. You look back in your books and you see that over the period of the last 12 months, you have sold 250 units for this particular vendor to whomever, doesn't matter,
Yeah.
government or commercial, right? You expect the same volume, if not more, of business this year. Use that number to negotiate a quantity discount, right?
Yes.
Um, that's
Yes.
one great way, one very popular way, because when we're day to day, and unless you ask, unless you have the conversation, they're just gonna, continue on taking the orders, fulfilling them. And if you're not keeping the data, who's gonna? They're not gonna come to you and say, "Oh, you're a VIP. You sold 250 units. We're gonna pay you more now, or we're gonna cut your costs rather." So, advocate for yourself. And part of not even just government contracting, part of business in general is negotiation.
Yep.
And essentially, it could make or break.
Yes. And ultimately, I think if I could leave you with any parting thoughts on this, is just you're in business to make money, right? We all want to make money. Um, and ultimately, it costs money to make money. We all know that. And in these times, it is very hard to keep our money because everything's so expensive. So in your business, you want to make the best decisions for you because you're the one that's on the line. It's your risk, right? So watch where your money goes, get comfortable with it. I know accounting is very uncomfortable, but
Boring.
it is so boring,
It's boring.
but
I'm the
it's
same.
important because if you don't pay attention to where your money's going, A, someone will steal it because you're not watching it. B, you won't know if you're pricing things and making a profit if you're only looking at your top line. And you're going to be surprised too late when you realize you're cash poor. So, and you wouldn't believe how many large corporations that are making $35 million a year are cash poor. They live on a credit line. But if they had one bill that came out of nowhere, it would end them forever. Or one contract that stopped out of nowhere, it would end their business. So you want to start early the right way. And this is how. Get comfortable being uncomfortable, as we all know it.
Yep, that's true. And if you don't know if this isn't your strength, call in help, right?
Yes.
I mean, there's like Left Brain Pros. They do consultations. Natasha provides CFO services. There's CPAs, there's bookkeepers. Check credentials, do your due diligence.
Mhm.
But I had someone when I first started my business, I didn't know what I was doing. QuickBooks, I got in there, I was like, oh, I know I'm supposed to be using this, but like it just there was so much going on in there, and I was like, what do I put here? How do I what's going on? So I just hired someone to train me and teach me what was going on in my QuickBooks account. Help me set it up correctly. It didn't have to be a big expense. I paid her for a few hours of her time and it worked out splendidly. I was
Yeah.
able to then retrain someone else on how to keep my books, someone
Mhm.
I pay a whole lot less money to. So, I mean, there's always ways around it. If it's not your thing, if this today was foreign to you, um, reach out for help. We have a
Yes.
couple. Deshaun asked, does this sheet flow over nicely to the DCA ICE report?
The DCA ICE report, it does because you can just take the rates that it provides you and you can put it in there. So your pricing essentially, you want to be able to kind of put your fringe, you want to put your overhead, you want to put your G&A. The only thing is that these are locked sheets. So you have to pull this from your P&L. So this I can't put it in there. I wish it did, but je ne soy magic.
The Marine
But
to the Marine from Texas says, good evening. It's his first time joining us, his or her first time. Thank you for joining us. We are super glad to have you. We are over time a little bit, but does anyone else have any additional questions? And Alex, if you're out there, you'll be happy to know that I solved the 7:30 cutoff issue. We are
yay.
also going to be having part two of our proposal session next week, the proposal 101 course. So just want to give you that plug before you guys go. Anyone else have any more questions on indirect rates? Going once. Do you have anything else, Natasha, to add?
No, I will make sure that you have access to an indirect rate structure that feeds in nicely to this pricing. And what I would like to do, and I've done it before, is create another tab for you to take what's in your P&L You can export it as an Excel and just paste it into the tab and it'll automatically pull into your rates. So that's what we're going to upload, and that'll make life a lot easier for you guys. Um, and if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out. I'm always happy to help. Like if you ask me about finance, I'll talk all day long. So I'm happy to bore you.
Yeah, we've been talking about finance now for an hour, so I gotta say, um, I'm about financed out for the evening. How
It's
about you
new for you,
guys?
Ashley.
No, I love it. I definitely learned a couple things myself here tonight about how these spreadsheet works and how good you are at them. Might be hitting you up for that.
I am an Excel nerd. But you also have the pricing sheet, which is really nice because it'll provide you some pricing strategies within direct rates. We'll have a little breakout. I'll get into this a little more to make life a little easier to you, and then I'll send it over to Ashley to upload and put in the link.
Yeah, so you guys maybe give us a week or so. You can go to govconhacks.com/podcast. And we have added the resources with the corresponding episode that we discussed them for your convenience. So you can always come back and find them there.
Yay.
All right, ladies and gents, it's been fun. I hope everybody enjoys their weekend, and you know where to find us if you guys have any questions. We'll see you back same time next week with Sarah Sinati to continue our proposal template discussion that we did not finish last time.
Old
All
school.
right, guys.
Bye,
More
guys.
proposals.
Don't
Bye,
do
everyone. Have a great weekend.